Welcome back to the Great Give Radiothon here on WNHH FM. This is Alan Appel, staff writer for a lot of years here with the New Haven Independent. And we are hosting the wonderful nonprofits of New Haven coming on our air here for 15 or 20 minutes, talking about what they do. And what they do is make a difference in people's lives. So we have a bit of a gap. The Fuse Theater Company of West Haven is going to be on board shortly. And Paul Bass, the founding editor of The Independent, is going to be talking to them and to folks later into the afternoon as The Great Give continues. So I encourage you to go to thegreatgive.org. And you're not supposed to forget the word thegreatgive.org. And support any of the organizations you hear about on the radio. We talked earlier to Desk, the Downtown Evening Soup Kitchen, and we talked to the wonderful people at Fellowship Place earlier. They were guests, and let me see who else. A Broken Umbrella Theater Company, and Horizons at Foot, like at the Foot School, wonderful organization that takes over the campus of the Foot School and hosts a great summer experience for hundreds of New Haven school kids. And there are many more, but in the meantime, in our little hiatus here, I have a book of poetry, an anthology that actually belongs to my wife. And I picked it up on the way in, and lo and behold, there's a poem that I turned to by accident, by one of the great and last public poets of the 20th century anyway, W.H. Auden. And it's called Refugee Blues. And refugees are very much on our mind here and on the minds of New Haven nonprofits and on the minds of the world. So I just thought I would read this. Auden is an Englishman, as many of you know, who came to America in the 1930s. And he's most famous, I think, in our minds for being the poet whose poem about the coming of the Nazis became the kind of the anthem of the recovery from the trauma of 9/11. That poem was called, I think, September 1st, 1939. I'm not going to read that because I frankly can't find it in this anthology. But the opening lines I remember by heart, something to the effect that I sit in a dive on 52nd Street, lonesome and afraid, as the clever hopes expire of a mean, dishonest decade, and so on and so forth. And the mean, dishonest decade is the serious social and economic issues of the 1920s and 30s in Germany and around Europe. The Depression, the inflation in the Weimar Republic, the disaffection, the homelessness of many people that ultimately were exploited by the Nazis in order for them to gain power in 1933. And Auden wrote about that. And it was a kind of warning for people when he wrote it, and it's a warning for us now. But since I can't find it, this wonderful writer has something called Refugee Blues, and that's what I'm going to read now. Also set in the 1930s. Refugee Blues. Say this city has 10 million souls. Some are living in mansions, some are living in holes. Yet there's no place for us, my dear, yet there's no place for us. Once we had a country and we thought it fair. Look at the atlas and you'll find it there. We cannot go there now, my dear, we cannot go there now. In the village churchyard there grows an old yew. Every spring it blossoms anew. Old passports can't do that, my dear. Old passports can't do that. The council banged the table and said, if you've got no passport, you're officially dead. But we're all still alive, my dear, but we're all still alive. Went to a committee, they offered me a chair, asked me politely to return next year. But where shall we go today, my dear? But where shall we go today? Came to a public meeting. The speaker got up and said, if we let them in, they will steal our daily bread. He was talking of you and me, my dear. He was talking of you and me. Thought I heard the thunder rumbling in the sky. It was Hitler over Europe saying, they must die. Oh, we were in his mind, my dear. Oh, we were in his mind. Saw a poodle in a jacket fastened with a pin. Saw a door opened and a cat let in. But they weren't German Jews, my dear, but they weren't German Jews. Went down to the harbor, stood upon the quay, saw the fish swimming as if they were free. Only 10 feet away, my dear, only 10 feet away. Walked through a wood, saw the birds in the trees. They had no politicians and sang at their ease. They weren't the human race, my dear, they weren't the human race. Dreamed I saw a building with 1,000 floors, 1,000 windows, and 1,000 doors. Not one of them was ours, my dear, not one of them was ours. Stood on a great plain in the falling snow. 10,000 soldiers marched to and fro, looking for you and me, my dear, looking for you and me. Well, that's the wonderful W.H. Auden on the Refugee Blues. I'm wondering what else we might read that would speak to the current moment here. A moment when we have refugees, homeless people, and one challenge after another. I don't know, let's look at something maybe by Elizabeth Bishop. And she has a poem called The Imaginary Iceberg. We'd rather have the iceberg than the ship, although it meant the end of travel, although it stood stock still like a cloudy rock and all the sea were moving marble. We'd rather have the iceberg than the ship. We'd rather own this breathing plain of snow, though the ship's sails were laid upon the sea, as the snow lies undissolved upon the water. O solemn floating field, are you aware an iceberg takes repose with you, and when it wakes, may pasture on your snows? This is a scene a sailor gives his eyes for. The ship's ignored, the iceberg rises, and sinks again, its glassy pinnacles correct elliptics in the sky. This is the scene where he who threads the boards is artlessly rhetorical. The curtain is light enough to rise on finest ropes that airy twists of snow provide. The widths of these peaks spar with the sun. Its weight the iceberg dares upon a shifting stage and stands and stares. This iceberg cuts its facets from within like jewelry from a grave. It saves itself perpetually and adorns only itself. Perhaps the snows which so surprise us lying on the sea. Goodbye, we say, goodbye to as the ship steers off, where waves give in to one another's waves and clouds run in a warmer sky. Icebergs behoove the soul to see them so fleshed fair and erected indivisible. And so ends a poem by Elizabeth Bishop, and we welcome now the Fuse Theater Company from West Haven, and Paul Bass, the founding editor of The Independent, will be your host here on the Great Give Radiothon. Thank you very much. Hang on a second. Here comes the Fuse Theater Company.
And thank you, Alan Appel. It is just, I think one of the most reassuring parts every year when we have the Great Give is that Alan is here reading poetry, having these wonderful conversations with the people who make New Haven a place with heart and soul. And yes, you are listening to the Great Give Radiothon on WNHH-FM, New Haven's home for community radio, 103.5. This is that great time of year when we have people who just make New Haven a great place and making it a better place. come in and tell us how they're doing it, and then we get to pony up, give you a little spare change, and hear all about it. So, as Alan mentioned, we're mentioning Elizabeth. What's your last name, Elizabeth?
Santos. Santos, like toss the ball.
Oh, Santos.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thanks for coming on. I'm going to ask you might want to put on headphones to hear you. It's up to you.
Okay.
And remember, thegreatgift.org. So we're up to 4,358 donors. Oops. 59. Oops. Whoa. 4,363 donors. See, as we speak, people are ponying up
Yes.
to support the great nonprofits in New Haven. There are over $855,000 raised.
Wow.
We want to get in the millions. We're going to
Wow.
get there.
Yeah.
484 organizations, one of which is the Fuse. So, Elizabeth Santos, do you have a song or a poem for us?
I do not, because we were going to have
Oh, right.
Noah sing, and
Yeah.
unfortunately,
Well,
he-
that was our bad. So, I found
That's
out
okay.
this building we're in is grandfathered under the code.
Yes.
And I'm not one of the owners of the building, so I'm going to not take any responsibility.
No.
So, we've always had handicapped people come in, people in wheelchairs,
Yes.
but we lift them over that one step,
Yes.
which is not legal, unfortunately, unless you're grandfathered into
Yes. Yeah.
being allowed to do that. We're wrong. So we're asking the building to change that
Yeah.
because of what happened this morning, because I feel terrible
Yeah.
that he didn't get to come on and sing for us today.
Because you would have missed a beautiful voice.
And if you don't mind me getting close to the mic or bring it close to
Sure,
you either way.
I can get
Or you
close.
can pull it close either way.
Yeah, that works.
What was he going to sing?
He was going to sing a song from Falsettos, which is a musical that we did last summer. And actually, you can see some of those pieces on YouTube. Noah Golden was not only he was a primary actor and in that performance, but he's also the chairman of our board, and he is a proficient drummer,
Well,
and he is a director.
I got to meet him outside. He seems like a nice guy.
He is a wonder for us. He is a director that is going to take on directing Assassins by Stephen Sondheim and John Weidman in September. So that's his next event. He won't be in it. He'll be directing it. So we are in the process of getting ready to put out a casting call for that performance.
So tell me about the Fuse Theater, Elizabeth. What is the Fuse Theater Company?
So Fuse Theater was birthed in 2019 as a nonprofit community theater that wants to be based in West Haven, Connecticut. And we have a passion for igniting a love of theater in our community. But we seek to bring beauty, excitement, and vital impact of theater to the greater West Haven community, and that includes New Haven and East Haven and the Shoreline. And we want to do this through producing theater of the highest possible caliber in every production, staging productions that bring diverse communities in our world together to create, to play, and learn, and in doing so create a larger, healthier community. And we also want to offer multi-generational educational space for all so that we can teach stagecraft, acting, playwriting, and production to anyone who wants to
So
learn
is there
it.
a special aspect of the Fuse Company that makes it different from other theater? I get this community base, which in and of itself is very valuable.
Mm-hmm.
You said it's also multi-generational. It's a school. Like, how did it come about? Who formed this? And what they said, what was the vision?
Sure. So the company was formed by Laura Morton and Susan Larkin, who saw that there was a need for theater in West Haven. There is no theater building in West Haven or space. There is a small space called Music Back Then, which at that time was called RVP Studios on Bull Hill Lane. And
Didn't
Su-
Vic Steffens have a recording studio on Campbell?
he may have.
I went there years ago. I'm getting old. This is decades back. Okay. Near the diner.
Maybe.
I was there once.
So because Susan Larkin and her husband Lance were running RVP Studios at the time in 2019, Laura approached them and said, hey, could we get a theater company going? They decided to create it as a nonprofit, and they put out a casting call for Lion King Jr. So through the winter of 2019 and 20, they put on this production, and we're going to do performances in March of 2020 with all these kids, and it was shut down because of COVID. So we kind of changed tact. We went online like everybody else. We spent the next year putting together a amazing full-length featured film of Shakespeare's Midsummer Night's Dream.
Interesting.
And it is a beautiful production because it is entirely with teenagers. There's a couple of adults in it, but it's entirely of teens. It was done in COVID. We kind of said, well, everybody's doing funny productions that look really awkward on Zoom. Nobody really knew that technology very well. And
this is the thing how we all learned to
that's
do
how we all
technology
learned how to
together.
do this technology
So fast.
together. And so we said, well, let's just use all of these things that we have at our disposal and embrace it and put this entire Shakespeare production in 2020 during COVID. Let's make the fairies be computer viruses, for lack of a better way, just flitting around in your computers and creating havoc. Let's do this in a way that everybody can kind of connect with Shakespeare. So we did that. And then we also had Lydia Arachne, who's a local artist, a musician and composer. And she composed an entire bank of songs that use Shakespeare's lyrics. And they are performed throughout this video of Midsummer Night's Dream. It's called Midsummer Night's Dream Rewired, the Rewired Musical. And it is
fun.
available for free on YouTube. And we do have an educational packet for any teacher that wants to bring this in as a unit in their classrooms in junior high and high school. So if you're teaching English and covering Shakespeare, if you're teaching music, if you're teaching theater arts, this is a great unit that you could do by showing this and then using the educational packet that we put together by qualified teachers to go through the material.
We're talking to Elizabeth Santos of Fuse Theater Company on the Great Give Radiothon. 36 hours. We're all ponying up to support great nonprofits, old and new. You're on the newer end.
I'm on the newer end.
And people can go to thegreatgive.org. Don't forget thegreatgive.org. And this segment, we're asking you to look up Fuse Theater, F-U-S-E, company, and throw them a little change,
Yeah.
a little extra to keep it going. So how do you do live plays now?
Yes, now we do. So since COVID, we've done a couple of musicals. We've done 3 concerts. Our most recent was at Music Back Then in West Haven. We did The Gospel According to Broadway. So we picked a canon of songs from Broadway that had gospel roots. And it was a fabulous performance. We did 2 performances, and we had a wide range of audience members that came from all walks of life, and from the Broadway end, from the church end.
So you don't have your own space where you perform,
We
do you?
do not. That's our heart's desire.
But do you always perform in West Haven?
We did 2 performances at Bragamos in
in
New
New
Haven. We did 2 musicals there. And we did a couple of performances at Gateway Christian Fellowship on Bull Hill Lane in West Haven. And we've done, as I say, a couple at Music Back Then on
The reason
Bull Hill
I
Lane.
asked you that,
Mhm.
Elizabeth, was that one thing that interests me very much about your project is the potential for an art scene in a place like West Haven. There have always been artists living there, partly because it costs less traditionally than New Haven did. So if you're an artist, right?
That's
so it's
right.
always creative ferment there. I mean, even back, I remember in 1983, my wife and I got an artist there that made our wedding rings.
Yes.
And but I know there always been musicians there and artists,
Yeah.
and it's a 60,000 person city.
It is a very
It's a city.
rich with artists. Yeah.
So I agree it's regional. You mentioned how you look out to East
Mm.
Haven, of course. I'm sure Milford and places like the other side, and Stratford. But I love the idea when we think of us as a region today on the Great Give, of how we've only started to tap the potential of all that can be done in our community, bring people together to give voice to the people living here, the talent that can be shown on display. So I think it's amazing that Fuse is happening there.
Yes.
And that you went to Bragamos, which is one of the great community theater spaces in New Haven.
Yes. Yeah. And that works for a bit, right? As you know, Paul, it seats whatever, 100, maybe 120 at Bragamos. But if you start to grow and you need a space that's got 200 or 300 seats or more, you're stuck. You're looking around. So Music Back Then will allow us, I think we're going to seat up to 200 for Assassins.
Oh, okay. And when
per
is
show.
that? When is that one?
That's going to be in September. We're going to do 6 performances of that musical at Music Back Then in September of 2024.
So tell me about it. Now, what's your role there, Elizabeth?
I'm the treasurer, so I'm on the board of directors, and specifically I'm the treasurer.
Do you do any theater yourself?
I did join the chorus for The Gospel According to Broadway, so
How was that?
it was great singing with them. That was
So could you
good.
tell me about a day you've been present, involved in the work going on there, where you said, "This is why I do it. This is the difference it can make."
Yeah, I would say, and I've produced a number of their shows, learning along the way. I think seeing the audience, I think particularly seeing the audience when we did Falsettos last summer, just the great excitement as they came in. We were playing a music track that was sort of the period of the 80s, which is when Falsettos is sort of based around the AIDS epidemic. And everybody's sort of getting into that. And then we have this fantastic performance of local artists, and they're singing, and there's humor, and there's poignancy, and people are getting moved. And then, we're eating 80s Twinkies
80s. What makes it
and
Twinkie?
ding dongs.
But wait, so what makes Twinkies and ding
I
dongs
don't
80s?
know. I don't know, but maybe because that's when that was in my lunchbox.
Was
Maybe-
mine in the 60s.
So they've been around. They've got a shelf life of.
But they're still,
You know,
and they're probably the ones you ate might have been made in the 60s
this is
or
true.
the 80s. Do you ever notice how the Twinkies and the ding dongs, they I don't think they ever changed the matter in them. I don't know if they're really
I think the
food.
shelf life of
Yeah,
those
yeah.
is extraordinary.
Do you have a favorite play that you hope they do one day?
I've always wanted them to do Les Mis, but I would really love it if they did either Kinky Boots or Waitress.
Mm-hmm. All right. Do you go to the other theaters in town?
I do, yeah.
Where's your favorite place to see theater?
I would say the Schubert. The last one that I went to Jesus Christ Superstar there, and
They got Hadestown now.
yes, which I've heard is fabulous. So,
Great.
but I'll be seeing 6 in Schenectady a couple of weeks from now
Why
on the road.
Schenectady?
Well, because we're on the road. My husband and I are going to take a little trip, and he said, "Oh, it's playing in Schenectady. Let's
Oh, that
stop in
sounds fun.
Schenectady." I'm like,
All right.
"Okay, let's do it."
All right. So when you want to give an elevator pitch before I let you go in 30 seconds or less, why do you want, and we do want you to do this right now, if you're listening, watching, thegreatgive.org, please give some money to the Fuse Theater Company that's making live theater happen in West Haven. What's your elevator pitch?
My elevator pitch is for the Great Give. We are looking to raise $7,500 to cover the 10 musicians that are not required, but suggested for the Assassins musical in September. And that is a huge chunk of change, but we do want to pay our musicians,
Definitely.
and we want to pay our
Pay the
creatives.
musicians.
Absolutely. We're all about paying our creatives to do what they do so well. So come and join us.
All right. Well, thank you for joining us today, Elizabeth.
You're very welcome, Paul.
And I've
Thank
so
you.
loved hearing about the Fuse Company. We're going to take a little break, and we're expecting to come back with Connecticut Fair Housing. We're going to listen to Eliyahu Hanavi from the Afro-Semitic Experience, thegreatgive.org. 36 hours you got to go there again and again and again to pony up for our nonprofit.